My name's Amelia, and I'm 29 years old. For the past 5 years, I've been making a living as an event planner. Weddings, birthdays, anniversaries, you name it, I've organized it. It's not what I thought I'd be doing when I was younger, but life has a funny way of surprising you. I studied economics in college, but that's not where my passion lay. During my time there, I found myself drawn to organizing educational and entertainment events on campus. It started small, a study group here, a movie night there. But before I knew it, I was the go-to person for any event that needed planning. After graduation, I knew I couldn't see myself crunching numbers in an office. So, I took a leap of faith and started my own event planning business. It wasn't easy at first. I had to build my reputation from scratch, taking on any job I could get. No event is too small, I'd tell potential clients with a smile, even as I worried about making rent that month. But slowly, surely, word spread. One satisfied client led to another, and before I knew it, I had more work than I could handle. 5 years flew by, and here I am, with a thriving business and a reputation I'm proud of. Today, I'm sitting across from Mr. Johnson, a successful businessman who's turning 50 next month. He wants a party to remember, and I'm determined to give him just that. So, Mr. Johnson, I say, pulling out my notebook, what did you have in mind for your big day? He leans back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. Well, I was thinking something classy. Maybe a black tie affair at the Grand Hotel? I nod, jotting down notes. That's a great venue. We could do a classic Hollywood theme. Red carpet entrance, paparazzi-style photographers. As I'm mid-sentence, my phone buzzes. I glance at it, ready to ignore the call, but the name on the screen makes me pause. It's my sister, Sarah. Now, I should probably explain about my family. It's complicated. I have a younger sister, Sarah, who's 7 years my junior. She's always been the apple of our parents' eye. Don't get me wrong, my parents took care of me too, but there was always a difference in how they treated us. When I went to college, they couldn't find the money to help me out. It was my grandmother who stepped in, bless her soul. But a few years later, when Sarah went to college, suddenly, my parents had no problem paying for her tuition and a rented apartment. It stung, I won't lie. Over the years, I've learned to accept it, but it's left a mark. I don't talk to my family much these days. So, seeing Sarah's name on my phone is a surprise. I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson, I say, standing up. Would you excuse me for a moment? It's my sister, and she rarely calls. He waves me off with a kind smile. Of course, take your time. I step out of the room and answer the phone. Sarah? Is everything okay? Amelia. Her voice is bright, excited. You need to come over to Mom and Dad's right away. We have big news. I sigh, knowing I'll regret this. All right, I'll be there as soon as I can. I hang up and return to Mr. Johnson, apologizing profusely. I'm so sorry, but I have a family emergency. Can we reschedule for tomorrow? He's understanding, thankfully. I drove to my parents' house, with a knot in my stomach. It had been months since I'd last been there, and I wasn't exactly looking forward to this impromptu family gathering. I rang the doorbell, and my mother answered, a forced smile on her face. Amelia, dear, come in. The living room was crowded. My father sat in his usual armchair, Sarah was perched on the couch, practically vibrating with excitement. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, about my age, with a polite smile. Amelia. Sarah jumped up, grabbing the man's hand and pulling him forward. This is Mark, my fiancé. I blinked, surprised. Fiancé? Wow, congratulations. Mark seemed nice enough, but I couldn't help wondering how long they'd been together. Sarah had never mentioned him before. So, I said, turning to Sarah, is this why you called me over? To meet Mark? Sarah's smile widened. Well, partly. But there's more. She clasped her hands together, practically bouncing. We're having an engagement party soon, and I want you to plan it. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach. Oh, Sarah, I don't know. I'm pretty booked up right now. Nonsense, my father interrupted, his voice gruff. This is your sister we're talking about. Family comes first. I bit back a retort about how family hadn't come first when I needed help with college. Instead, I forced a smile. It's not that simple, Dad. I have commitments to other clients. But you're the best at this stuff, Sarah insisted. And I want the most amazing engagement party ever. Of course it'll be free. You wouldn't charge your own sister, would you? I looked around the room, seeing expectant faces. Even Mark looked like he assumed I'd do this for nothing. I felt cornered. Okay, I said finally, my voice tight. I'll organize it for free. But you'll need to cover all the other expenses, venue, catering, decorations, music, everything else. Sarah squealed and hugged me. You're the best, Amelia. We'll pay for everything else, promise. As I left the house an hour later, after listening to Sarah's grand ideas for her perfect engagement party, I felt a mixture of regret and resignation. I'd have to call Mr. Johnson and cancel our rescheduled meeting. There went a lucrative contract. Back home, I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Johnson's number. Mr. Johnson? It's Amelia. I'm so sorry, but I won't be able to take on your birthday party after all. A family obligation has come up. My friend Lisa is also an event planner. She's excellent. I can give you her contact information if you'd like. After passing along Lisa's details and apologizing once more, I hung up. I stared at my phone, a sense of unease growing in my stomach. I'd just turned down a major client for a job I wasn't even getting paid for. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparations. I secured a beautiful restaurant for the date Sarah wanted. It wasn't easy, the place was popular and usually booked months in advance. But Tony, the owner of the restaurant, couldn't resist my pressure. I also worked with the chef to create a spread that would impress even the most discerning guests. Then came the decorations, the music, the invitations, every detail had to be perfect. I called my go-to DJ, Mike, to book him for the event. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. I had similar conversations with all my usual contractors, the florist, the cake baker, the photographer. They all trusted me enough to agree to delayed payment, but I could sense their unease. As the days passed, I found myself turning down other jobs to focus on Sarah's party. It was eating into my income, but I told myself it would be worth it to see my sister happy. Finally, with everything arranged, I sat down to create the invoice. I carefully itemized every expense, from the venue rental to the last flower in the centerpieces. The total was substantial. I took a deep breath and emailed the invoice to Sarah. There, I muttered to myself. All done. That evening, my phone rang. It was Sarah. Hey sis, I answered. Did you get the invoice? There was a moment of silence, then Sarah's voice came through, sickly sweet. Amelia, darling, there must be some mistake. Why are you sending me a bill? I frowned, confused. What do you mean? It's the invoice for all the expenses for your engagement party. Remember, you said you'd cover everything except my fee? Sarah laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. Oh, Amelia. I thought you understood. You're supposed to pay for all of this. You make so much money with your business. I was speechless. My mind raced, thinking of all the vendors waiting to be paid, all the promises I'd made based on Sarah's word. Sarah, listen to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I organized this for free, which is already a huge favor. I can't pay for everything else too. You promised. But Sarah had already hung up. I tried calling my parents, hoping they could talk some sense into Sarah. But to my horror, they took her side. They insisted I should pay, that it was my duty as the successful daughter. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. How could they do this to me? How could they expect me to bankrupt myself for a party? As I sat there, trying to figure out what to do, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a post from Sarah on social media. Curious, I clicked on it. "Can't wait for tomorrow's engagement party," the post read. "So excited to celebrate with everyone. We've spent so much to make it perfect." In that moment, something snapped inside me. If Sarah wanted to play games, well, two could play at that. My fingers trembled as I dialed the restaurant's number. It was late, but I knew Tony would still be there, closing up after the night's service. "Tony? It's Amelia. I'm so sorry, but I need to cancel tomorrow's event. I'll pay you a cancellation fee. And I'll make this up to you, I swear." Tony sighed. "All right, Amelia. I trust you. But this isn't like you." One by one, I called all the vendors. The florist, the DJ, the cake baker, everyone. Each call was painful, each explanation more humiliating than the last. By the time I finished, my savings account was significantly lighter, but at least my professional relationships were intact. I paid everyone their fees and cancellation charges out of my own pocket. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and settled in front of my computer. I knew Sarah would be live streaming her arrival at the restaurant. I wanted to see this. Right on schedule, Sarah's beaming face appeared on my screen. She was outside the restaurant, surrounded by a group of excited-looking friends and family members. "We're here," Sarah chirped into her phone camera. "I can't wait to show you guys everything. It's going to be amazing." I watched as she confidently strode up to the restaurant doors, her fiancé Mark in tow. She reached for the handle, still chattering away to her viewers. "And here oh." The smile froze on Sarah's face as she tugged at the door. It didn't budge. "That's weird," she laughed nervously, trying again. "It must be stuck." But it wasn't stuck. Sarah's eyes widened as she finally noticed the sign on the door. "Event cancelled," it read in bold letters. The live stream erupted in confused comments. Sarah's face paled as she turned to Mark, who looked equally bewildered. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction as I watched the chaos unfold. It was petty, I knew, but after years of being the family doormat, it felt good to finally stand up for myself. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Sarah." "Amelia," she screeched. "What the hell is going on? The restaurant is closed. Everything's ruined." I kept my voice calm. "Well, Sarah, since you refused to pay for the event you asked me to organize, I had to cancel it. I couldn't let my contractors go unpaid." But what about the food?" Mark's voice came through faintly in the background. "Where's all the food we were supposed to have?" I couldn't help but smile a little. "Oh, the food? I donated it to a homeless shelter. At least someone will enjoy it." More screaming followed, but I'd had enough. I hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. My mother's voice came through, shrill and angry. "Amelia, how could you do this to your sister? We raised you better than this." I felt a surge of frustration. "Mom, did Sarah tell you what she tried to do? She wanted me to pay for everything." "So what?" My father's voice boomed in the background. "You're doing well for yourself. You could have helped your sister out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, we're talking about thousands of dollars here. I'm not made of money." "You're just being selfish," my mother snapped. "Your poor sister is heartbroken. Her special day is ruined because of your greed." I tried to stay calm, but their words were cutting deep. "Greed? I organized everything for free. I even paid cancellation fees out of my own pocket." But they weren't listening. My mother's next words felt like a slap in the face. "You know what I think?" she said, her voice cold. "I think you did this because you're jealous. You're almost 30, Amelia. No husband, no children. You couldn't stand to see her getting married while you have no one. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. How dare they? How dare they twist this around and make me the villain? As I sat there, trying to process everything that had happened, an idea struck me. If Sarah and Mark had promised to pay for everything, where did that money go? They must have had it, right? I opened my laptop and drafted an email. In it, I detailed all the expenses I had incurred, including the cancellation fees. I demanded that Sarah and Mark reimburse me for every penny. If you don't pay, I wrote, my fingers flying over the keyboard, I'll be forced to take legal action. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It was a bold move, I knew, but I was done being the family pushover. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing again. This time, it was a barrage of text messages from Sarah and Mark. I steeled myself and opened them. The messages were a mix of threats and insults. Sarah called me every name in the book, while Mark threatened to ruin me if I tried to take them to court. I saved screenshots of every message. If this did end up in court, I wanted all the evidence I could get. I also needed advice from someone who might have some insight into Sarah's fiancé and his family. That's when I remembered my Aunt Linda. She always seemed to know all the town gossip. Maybe she could tell me something about Mark and his family. I dialed her number, hoping she'd be willing to talk. Aunt Linda? It's Amelia. I need to ask you something about Sarah's fiancé. Aunt Linda's voice crackled through the phone, warm and familiar. Amelia, dear. It's been ages. What do you want to know about Mark? I took a deep breath. Well, I was wondering if you knew anything about his family, their financial situation. Oh, honey, Aunt Linda chuckled. You're asking the right person. The Thompsons, that's Mark's family, they're quite well off. They own a chain of laundromats across the city, and word is they've got their fingers in some lucrative real estate deals too. I felt my jaw drop. Wait, what? They're wealthy? Oh yes, very much so, Aunt Linda continued, oblivious to my shock. Why, I heard they gave Mark a hefty sum to arrange that engagement party. $30,000, if the rumors are true. My mind was reeling. $30,000? And they had tried to make me pay for everything? After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a few minutes. Then, determination set in. I knew what I had to do next. It took some digging, but I managed to find the address of Mark's parents. Without giving myself time to second-guess my decision, I got in my car and drove there. The house was impressive, a large, well-maintained property in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman answered, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. Can I help you? Mrs. Thompson? I asked. When she nodded, I continued, I'm Amelia, Sarah's sister. I need to talk to you and your husband about Mark and the engagement party. She looked surprised, but invited me in. Soon, I was sitting in their living room, facing both of Mark's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I began, my voice steadier than I felt, I'm here because I think you should know what happened with the engagement party. Over the next half hour, I explained everything. How Sarah had asked me to organize the party for free. How they had promised to pay for everything else, but then refused. How I had been forced to cancel everything and pay the cancellation fees myself. As I spoke, I saw the shock and dismay growing on their faces. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Mr. Thompson spoke, his voice tight with anger. We gave Mark $30,000 for this party. He told us everything was paid for. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. They believed me. Mr. Thompson left the room and returned a few minutes later with his checkbook. He wrote out a check for the full amount I had spent, plus a little extra for my trouble. It's the least we can do, he said, handing it to me. And don't worry, we'll be having a very serious conversation with Mark and Sarah about their behavior. As I left their house, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also sadness. This whole ordeal had exposed some ugly truths about my sister and her fiancé. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with texts. It was Sarah and Mark again, but this time their tone was very different. Gone were the threats and insults, replaced by panicked apologies and pleas for forgiveness. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine about the fallout from my visit to the Thompsons. Aunt Linda kept me updated. "You won't believe this, Amelia," she said during one of our phone calls. "Mark's parents have cut him off completely. No more monthly allowance, no financial support for the wedding, nothing." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. "Really? That's quite drastic." Aunt Linda's voice lowered conspiratorially. "Oh, honey, they were furious. Apparently, they don't take kindly to being lied to and having their money misused. Can't say I blame them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What about the wedding? Is it still happening?" There was a pause, then Aunt Linda chuckled. "Well, that's the kicker. Without Mommy and Daddy's money, Mark and Sarah can't afford the lavish wedding they were planning. Last I heard, they'd postponed it indefinitely." My parents, predictably, didn't see it that way. They blamed me for Sarah's misfortune, conveniently forgetting that it was her own actions that had led to this situation. "You've ruined your sister's life," my mother said during one particularly heated phone call. "Are you happy now?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mom, Sarah, and Mark tried to scam me out of thousands of dollars. They lied to everyone, including Mark's parents. How is that my fault?" But it was like talking to a brick wall. In their eyes, Sarah could do no wrong, and I was the villain who had destroyed her happiness. Despite the family drama, my life went on. I threw myself back into my work, rebuilding the client base I had neglected during the engagement party fiasco. Slowly but surely, things started to look up. One day, as I was leaving a meeting with a new client, I ran into Mr. Johnson, the man whose 50th birthday party I had canceled to work on Sarah's engagement. "Amelia," he called out, a smile on his face. "How have you been?" I felt a pang of guilt. "Mr. Johnson, I'm so sorry about canceling on you like that. It was unprofessional of me." He waved off my apology. "No need for that. Your friend Lisa did a wonderful job with the party. But I have to say, I missed your personal touch." An idea struck me. "Well, if you're planning any events in the future, I'd love the opportunity to make it up to you." Mr. Johnson's eyes twinkled. "As a matter of fact, my company's 25th anniversary is coming up. How would you like to handle that?" As I walked away, contract in hand, I couldn't help but feel that things were finally looking up. Yes, my relationship with my family was strained, but my business was thriving, and I had my self-respect intact. One evening, as I was poring over seating arrangements, a loud knock at my apartment door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. Cautiously, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. To my shock, I saw Sarah and Mark standing there. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" Sarah brazenly pushed past me into the apartment, Mark trailing behind her. "We're moving in," she announced. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Sarah said, her tone accusatory. "Because of you, Mark's parents cut us off. No money for the wedding, no allowance, nothing. So, we decided we're going to live here." I couldn't help it, I laughed. The sheer audacity of their plan was almost impressive. "You can't be serious. This is my home. You can't just decide to move in." Mark stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. "You owe us, Amelia. You ruined everything." I felt my patience snap. "I owe you nothing. You tried to scam me, remember? Now get out of my apartment." As I shut the door behind them, I heard Sarah's parting shot, "You'll be sorry." A few days later, I returned home from a meeting to find my apartment door surrounded by a strange, foamy substance. It took me a moment to realize what I was seeing: construction foam, hardened around the entire perimeter of my door. Furious, I called a locksmith service to remove the foam and replace my locks. As I waited, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, approached me. "Amelia, dear," she said, concern etched on her face. "I saw what happened. I have it on video if you need it." Sure enough, Mrs. Chen's security camera had captured Sarah and Mark in the act of vandalizing my door. The footage was clear as day. Armed with this evidence, I went straight to the police station. I filed a report for property damage and requested a restraining order against both Sarah and Mark. The legal process was draining, but ultimately satisfying. The court fined Sarah and Mark for the damage to my apartment and ordered them to cover the costs of repairs. More importantly, they were banned from coming within 500 feet of me for the next 2 years. When my parents found out, they were livid, not at Sarah, of course, but at me. They couldn't believe I'd taken legal action against my own sister. "How could you do this to your family?" my mother wailed over the phone. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "No, Mom. The question is, how could you support Sarah after everything she's done? I'm done being the family scapegoat." With that, I hung up the phone and blocked their numbers. It hurt, cutting ties with my family, but I knew it was necessary for my own well-being. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into work. Mr. Johnson's anniversary party was a resounding success, earning me glowing reviews and a slew of new clients. As I stood at the back of the beautifully decorated hall, watching the guests enjoy themselves, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Yes, I'd lost my family, but I'd gained something far more valuable: self-respect and the knowledge that I could stand on my own 2 feet.